I first want to thank you all for tuning in for what is now episode number 58 of Talking About Horses. And I'm really pleased to be joined in this episode by Donna Snyder-Smith. Donna has spent over 40 years teaching the equestrian arts. In 1991, the American Riding Instructors Association honored her with its first Lifetime Achievement Award for her success in producing award-winning horses and riders in multiple disciplines at regional, national, and international competitions. A respected clinician and journalist whose articles have appeared in many major equestrian magazines, Donna is also the author of The All-Around Horse and Rider, The Classic Western Rider, and The Complete Guide to Endurance Riding and Competition. Donna's newest book, The Alchemy of Horses, is an account of how PTSD controlled her every choice without her knowledge for nearly 60 years, and how she kept the disorder from sinking her with the help of the horses. Each chapter tells a true story of an individual horse, and a few humans, that helped to free her from the grips of her history, enabling her to attain the status of a well-respected, successful national professional in the process. Donna, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation on Talking About Horses.
Well, thank you for having me, Pat. It's a pretty big shift for me from where I have been throughout most of my career and where I find myself now.
Yeah. So you've recently retired from teaching clinics and taking on clients. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How's that?
Challenging. One, or at least I would have expected that when you retire, just generally using that word, it's kind of a kickback situation and not so much stress and not so much anything. More time to yourself, more time for whatever pleasure, attracts you. I didn't find it that way. But of course, when I retired, I tell friends I retired prematurely. I retired because my body was collapsing. I had beat it up aggressively during my career, not intentionally, but doing what, in my opinion, most professional trainers and instructors do. Maybe not the instructors so much if they don't ever get on a horse or ever train a horse, but if you do both, you're almost guaranteed to have some collisions with non-movable objects and or have the horse like the ground, for instance, or have a horse roll over, you because of an accident or something like that, all of which I had happened to me. What we meaning the trainers, because of our obligation to both our horses and our clients, we don't allow ourselves enough time for our bodies to get back in balance. Mm-hmm. We allow the very minimum amount of time for the body to heal. So, we don't have to walk with a cane or a crutch or a walker. We can get out of the house and we can get to the barn. All right. And the braver of us can get a foot in the stirrup. But we don't allow the time that is required for our bodies to get back in balance. And so what happens is it's like a horse with a saddle that doesn't fit. It's a willing horse. It knows the routine. It's not going to buck us off. It's going to do the best it can to do the routine. But as long as the saddle is creating pain, all right, in attempting to do the routine, in attempting to do what it understands that it's being asked to do, it uses what I call compensating muscles.
Yep, for sure. All
right. Compensating systems within the body. Same thing, So we get our jobs done. We know what we want from the horse. We ask our body to do something. If it doesn't work the way that it had worked before we got injured, and we're at all clever, we'll figure out another way. We'll get with the horse and say, okay, well, I know you didn't understand that, but how about if I do it this way? Mm-hmm. And if we get what we're after from the horse, we ignore what that does or does not allow our bodies to do. And 9 times out of 10, what it does is it does not allow our bodies to continue to heal in the ideal way, in a balanced manner.
Mm-hmm.
So as it's a slow process, I mean, the first time I took a introduction to the ground was when I was 14, broke a bone. I can't remember the last time, but there's any number of times where I do mention it in the book. One chapter, I think I called something about the definition of being dumb. I don't know if I can find it really quickly, but it's the chapter where I was playing. I renamed it. I called it the lesson in the importance of focus, and that's page 151. I was having fun. It was Friday night. The group down the road from us was a Western group. They brought in calves once a month, and the local folks that rode cutters and working cow horse came in and practiced. So nothing to do on a Friday night. I'm not a bar person, so we got on the horses. We rode down to watch what was going on, because I'm nothing if not an avid learner. And my initial education was English focused, all right, and out of the classics. But as soon as I got to California, it got very obvious to me that there was this whole world of additional information that I'd never been exposed to, and it happened to come under the heading of most people that do it in a Western saddle. So, yeah. So it's like, okay, I want to know more about this, because it's a chapter that I had never opened before. And I don't think you can know too much about horses. I mean, that's just my personal philosophy. So if you I always felt that if I start isolating myself to one discipline only, now I had no problem doing it for a period of time to really get saturated with that discipline, to really learn it, to understand it. Okay. Mm-hmm. But as soon as that was there, I tended to move to the next one. I think partly because of the challenge, but also mostly because, in my opinion, that enhanced and grew my information about all horses. And I'd be a millionaire if I was able to take just $10 home every time I used something I learned about a horse, or a circumstance involving a horse or myself, and both, in a completely different discipline, back to a quote unquote unrelated discipline, except for the fact that there was a horse in both. I would have retired a millionaire.
Yep, for sure. For sure. It's so common, right? We get stuck. I shouldn't say we get stuck, but I mean, we can. If we're only focused on the one thing, we just don't have that breadth of knowledge. And, horses are horses in all of those disciplines, right? And so how we educate them to do whatever that task is, there's moments that come up that may seem, like you said, that may seem completely out of the realm of that discipline. But if it helps to educate the horse, then it can't be wrong if it helps to educate the horse. Now, if it
educates us too.
If it's forcing or whatever, that's not suitable. But if it's helping the horse,
yeah. So, anyway, that was part of the reason for my early retirement, and then the other part was, I am, in all honesty, I see two paths. All right, in the equestrian industry right now. The one path that is very encouraging to me is that all of the new stuff that we're learning about horses, all of the information that finally the scientists that have the degrees on the wall are getting interested enough to do studies and to publish those studies and all this sort of stuff, that a lot of times, anyway, in my opinion, tells those of us who've been in the industry for a long time, around horses for a long time, something we already knew. But of course, if it's said with the certificate on the wall, then it has weight. Whereas if it's said by me at my barn or or whatever, or
Right.
Jane down the road or Johnny down the road, people have a tendency to dismiss it. So I'm seeing a tremendous expansion of awareness in things that we do with and for our horses that I feel speaks extremely positively for the improvement of the horse's life and interaction with humans.
Mm.
All right. So yay for that. All right.
Right.
At the same time, and I ask myself this question, and I haven't answered it yet. It's a question that I don't know if I'll answer before I check out. But you know the classical figure of yin and yang,
Mm-hmm.
the sort of the half little circle, one's black, one's white.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, a bunch
its
of conjoined
intent is
teardrop looking
to
shapes. Mm-hmm.
exactly its intent is to basically indicate that everything is in balance. Everything has its balance point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that, it sort of implies, or at least what I'm chewing on at the moment, is it implies that if we have good, we're also going to have bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of dragging my feet going along with that one. I want the lollipop without the medicine. Okay.
Right.
I don't mind the invested time and all of that, but I don't like the other path that has become or is becoming more and more clear. And I'll probably make some enemies, but this is straight up. I see it in almost every discipline I'm interested in. Right now, dressage is internationally, at least, dressage is it's becoming something else. I wish they would change the name. I really did. So we'd have two different names because the paths have now diverged to such a degree that, in my opinion, the two things are not even close to being similar.
Mm-hmm.
One's in again, in my opinion, one is an entertainment for an audience. The other is an art, and it's between the horse and the rider. And it doesn't matter if somebody's sitting in a chair outside the arena or nobody's sitting in the chair outside of the arena. Right. Yeah. And flipping to the other side, all right, the major disciplines, I watch the reiners, all right, and I see things like horses being asked to run backwards. Okay, back up quickly. I can handle that, as a scoring thing. What I can handle is having their whiskers drag, lines in the ground as that horse is asked to run backwards. And that's only one example. All right. Mm-hmm. But my point is that it doesn't matter whether I go to the English side or to the Western side. I was running into that every time I turned around. And the more I connected to the horses, the more the horses connected to me, the less I was able to tolerate being in an environment where mistakes that were obviously impairing the horse in one form or another, even if the horse was accepting, all right, I personally couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't continue to keep my focus on my student and teach when I felt the energy coming from one or other horses in that arena and knew that they were behaving, performing, but also at some level screaming about their discomfort. Yeah. So both reasons I took an early retirement.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit, because I want to get into that also. But let's back up a little bit for folks that maybe don't know you, for folks that haven't been introduced to your books, your articles, and the things that you write and share on social media. Let's go back to the beginning and your start with riding, because you had a pretty interesting start with a pretty influential teacher there to begin with. Is that right?
Mhm. Yes. Yes. I don't know if I got lucky, if I got blessed. I don't, fill in the word of your choice. But I found myself repeatedly in places where, other people would have killed to be, and I felt as though I ended up there as an accident, purely as an accident,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Probably the first one on the education, and I'm skipping the interaction with the draft horses, which was really truly my
Yeah.
very first one in Germany. I mean, real honest to God draft horses that pulled plows in the field. And I
Mm-hmm.
talk about that in the book, in the first chapter of the book, and what they taught me, and what they gave me, because by that time, I was way deeper than I had any clue into the trauma, into the ramifications of the trauma that I had experienced fairly much younger.
Mm-hmm.
But had no name for it, of course. So it's just your life. It is what
Right.
it is, and you do the best you can. So when I met them, that was the first time I became aware of this energy that was present when I moved in close to them. Now I'm maybe 11. No, that was before that. I was like 7, maybe
Okay.
7 or 8. So that awareness came that early. And again, an accident. My family was military. We got stuck in Germany, and we just happened to live in a building that was surrounded by farmers' fields. So there were my drafties. Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing that happened when we came back to the US was, again, by accident, by virtue of the fact that it was within about, it was within walking distance of our residence. It was a educational barn called Full Cry Farm. It was run by two women who were way, way ahead of their time in one aspect, in the aspect of being widely knowledgeable,
Mm.
um, but also outstanding teachers, especially the senior teacher. And one of the things that particularly, I didn't pay that much attention to it in many ways. It was just a thing. And that was that the senior instructor had actually spent 3 or 4 years in, I forget whether it was Wyoming or Montana, I think, where she actually went out and worked as a hand on a cattle ranch. So it was way pre Yellowstone, because I'm saying that because she lived in the bunkhouse with the guys.
Oh, okay.
All right. And she brought a couple of horses. She started her horses. She studied she was from the hunter crowd,
Yeah.
and she left and went out west and worked. All right.
Like a total
She was a
immersion learning experience.
Exactly. And in the
Yeah.
process of working, she learned about the old method of training Western horses, and she brought that back with her. And that's the senior instructor that I happened to walk into as a real novice. They used to call us barn mice. The kids that couldn't afford lessons, that would show up and hang out until they drove you nuts. So any smart instructor figured out real fast the way they would stay sane is if they kept the kids busy. Give them jobs to do. Well, in the
Yeah.
process of giving them jobs to do, what do? You got to teach them in order so that they don't get killed and the horses don't get killed. Okay, so
Right.
that was the general way the place ran. But I got an incredible education. It wasn't just about riding; it was about everything. It was about care of horses. It was about I don't even want to take up the time. I list them in the book, and I got a little bit surprised how long the list got
Yeah.
of the topics that that I was educated in. I would say 3 years of college, comparatively. Seriously, 3 years of college was what I got in that period of time, 3 to 4 years with them. And again, this is an English background. It included hunting, fox hunting, so not just equitation riding. Hadn't heard the word dressage, so that didn't happen till then. I mean, at that point. Then my family got sent to Germany again. Well, I landed in the middle of Germany. By now, I'm very clear on the fact that if I'm going to survive in this life, I need horses. And the only availability where I was a German dressage school. Now, if I can call Full Cry Farm organized in a casual way, that's what I would say. It was organized. It wasn't disorganized at all. All right. Mm-hmm. But it was organized in a casual way. Then the German dressage school was organized. I don't even know what to call it, but precisely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how you held the reins of the horse that you were going to ride in a lesson when you were getting it from the tie stalls to the main arena. Mm-hmm. You were instructed how to do it. And you had to do it that way. And I'm saying that not to pick it apart, only to say that was the level of control that they taught and wanted applied. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this 14-year-old going on 15 girl, US, worse. Okay. Worse. And I thought I knew something, which of course I didn't. It was worse than not knowing anything, truly. And I got to spend 3 years riding horses that were minimally educated to 4th level. Every school horse that was used in the place, that was used for a lesson, was at least a 4th level horse. That's unheard of these days.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. I mean, I know you go and take your students to Portugal in order to get the golden opportunity for them to sit on horses that are already educated. And I'm digressing a little bit, but people need to understand that they learn so much faster. It's not that you can't learn if you don't have that advantage, but you learn so much faster if you sit on a horse who gives you the correct response only to the correct aids.
Right.
If you can absolutely count on the fact that if the horse didn't give you what you asked for, had nothing to do with the horse not knowing it or not wanting it or not obeying it. Absolutely, you got to stop right there and start looking at what you were doing or not doing is more likely the case. And then, of course, with the Baron, the instructor at Augsburg Reitschule was the name of it. The instructor there, he was tough. I don't think many riders that I know of today would last. I don't. I only did because I was bordering on being dumb enough that I think they took pity on me. So.
Well, and you went there without speaking German, isn't that correct?
Oh, yes. It was a year before I could understand. It was a year before I could understand the equestrian vocabulary. But as I noted in the book, I actually think that worked for me because I could tell by his tone, and I knew when he was directing comments at me, which were usually very, very irritated. And after I learned a little bit about the language, they were very demeaning. All right. If I'd have had that in the first 6 months, I don't know if I would have come back, but I didn't. I knew he was mad at me. I knew I was doing something wrong.
Right. You could read the room.
But all of the ego-busting statements were sort of lost on me. So by the time I got a command of the language, I'd gotten far enough along in my writing that it sounded a little less harsh when he commented to me about what he wasn't happy with.
There you go.
Oh gosh. Came back, got married, went to the West Coast, opened a whole new chapter in my life because I had allowed myself to be talked into the fact that what I truly wanted to do in my heart, which was horses for my living, all right, for my profession, couldn't wasn't possible. And I gave it up. I gave up what I knew to be true for me. And it lasted for about 6 months until the my mental state wouldn't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, nope, that's it. I don't know what it's going to cost me. I don't know what I have to do, but I am not willing to live like this. I have to try. And that's about when I started taking on clients to teach. And the first few years, I didn't train for the public because I didn't ever want to be, I was smart enough to know I didn't ever want to be in a situation where somebody who was giving me a check, end of the month, end of whatever, could come in and say they weren't happy with how fast I was doing something with a horse. I wasn't willing to be in. I wasn't willing to put myself in that position. So what I did was, besides giving lessons, what I did was I would invest in horses, usually horses off the track, all right, that didn't run fast enough, all right, and I'd work them until I felt that they were where I wanted them to be. What I call basic education. Western people generally call it the basic handle. And then I would test my work by taking them to shows, local shows, anything from what I call backyard, to rated. At the time, it was AHSA, and it was a star rating. So, and I test myself. I'd go to the shows not to win ribbons, although winning ribbons was good for me. I mean, because the horse then went for sale. But that wasn't the main reason why I was there. The reason I was there was I want an unbiased opinion about whether or not my work is holding up to, the rest of the world, because I don't live in a big barn. I had my own place at the time. Well, I didn't own it, but I had leased my own place. So it wasn't like I was in a 100-stall barn where I could watch other trainers or that kind of thing. So I had to kind of hunt for the feedback, and that's how I did it.
Yeah, the feedback. Kind of see where you and those horses are, when you're outside of your own bubble or echo chamber or whatever.
Exactly. The proof is in the pudding, sort of, so to speak. And the proof kept coming back, saying, you're doing, not only that you're doing the right thing, but a lot of times I'd walk out with somewhere, not always first, of course, but somewhere in the 1, 2, 3s, and seldom out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6s. And that went all the way from the schooling shows all the way up to, the A-rated AHSAs. So I learned to trust myself more. I sold horses, and that augmented the income, the professional income. And the next shift I made was the shift into teaching riding. I had a couple of falls in the process of training horses. And it didn't take me very long to figure out that if I was going to continue into old age as a trainer, the chances of, becoming hurt were a lot higher than if I taught riding. And my background gave me enough classical information that it allowed me to sort of step into that. Although God knows I learned a ton about teaching after that point.
From the students is when we usually learn about the teaching, right?
Exactly.
And something I want to take us back, if you don't mind, for a moment. One of the things when we talk about your baseline of your education, right? We talked about riding with the Baron in Germany, but we didn't mention who that senior instructor was before Germany, when you were
Sally.
yeah.
Her name was Sally Foldenauer. She was from a well-to-do family in Virginia.
Okay.
And what she didn't talk about herself very much. I mean, it was always horse conversation, but she didn't talk about herself very much. But over the 4 years I was there, I found out that she left her family's home in Virginia and went to Montana because they wanted to marry her off to their idea of the perfect husband.
Oh.
Financially set and all this sort of stuff. The family didn't approve of her involvement in horses. And basically, gosh, when was that? Hang on. I have to go back and think in my head about which year it was. It was early 50s, early 1950s. All right. And she basically said, I'm out of here.
Mm.
You know,
Not
no family money, no nothing. I'm out of here. I'm interested in horses. I'm going to go out west and learn about horses. And that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
So she was a tremendous role model. She was also a hell of a cavalry captain. Well, okay. So the facility, Full Cry Farm, was located on something like 300 or next to about 300 acres of hunt country in Virginia.
Okay.
So this is rolling hills. It's got woods. It's got open. There's not a heck of a lot of flat on it. And part of how that Full Cry Farms made its income was to board hunters. So a lot of the people that hunted in the winter, all right, or the fall and the winter, didn't stay there in the summer. Anybody that's lived in Virginia knows what humidity is like, okay? Mm-hmm. So they would go away during the summer, and their horses, their hunters, would be boarded at Full Cry Farms and what they expected was that the horses would be kept fit, so that when they showed up in September or October, early October, before the hunt season got started, they didn't have to put in any time conditioning the horse. They just went through their saddle on and, yahoo with the opening hunt.
Okay.
Well, the barn mice, our reward for doing our work well was to be able to hack those horses out in this 300 acres of countryside. And Sally was, the leader of this.
Yeah. And
I'm not old enough to have trained with the cavalry, but I've read the cavalry books, all 4 manuals of them, and I can tell you, swear without any exaggeration, Sally would have had a hell of a cavalry troop. Because there was no excuse. It was over, under, around, or through, and you better find out, if your riding skills weren't up to it. She didn't sit there and say, oh, you poor dear. What she said is, well, you stay at home next time. You spend more time in the arena on these lessons. And when you have mastered this skill that obviously you don't have because you're on the ground or hung up on a tree limb or whatever.
Right.
Just
hanging around in the tree.
I don't mean to paint it cruel, but it wasn't. You couldn't be a marshmallow and ride with Sally.
You went from having that structure and that high expectation, right, to then having more structure and even higher expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is when I made that shift, I had no idea that there was this incredible depth of training information yet to be learned. It was like a sub-layer, because the information that I got about training horses was so correct and so good to begin with at Full Cry Farms. At least I saw it like that. And it was within a layer, okay? It was. But it was like a layer. I had no idea that there was this depth of classical dressage information that was a layer which actually was deeper than the layer that we had been working with, or I had been working with and being taught at Full Cry Farms. And I'm going to use that to refer now to what I said when we started, which was I'm in another transition, because I see myself and what I went through, my experiences with horses, as fairly, I'm going to call it common. I mean, it wasn't common in the sense that I got lucky in these different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my perception of horses, I loved them to death. I knew that they were critical to my survival. All right. I mean, in a less specific way than I know now. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But they were critical to me. But the shift from that layer of information that I got at Full Cry Farm and the depth of the information that I got introduced to and was being trained in Germany in classical dressage is only about half of the intensity of the shift that I experienced at the end of my career, when I was able to put all of the connective points together and sort of got self-diagnosed with the PTSD, because all these things were happening to me all throughout my life. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know they were connected. I didn't have any idea. You know, the ones that were, and most of them did, make me uncomfortable. It was just a struggle to figure out, you know, mea culpa, figure out how to deal with it. You know, you're responsible, etc. Mm-hmm. So until the scientists finally decided, or the medical people finally decided around 1980 to actually take a look at the similarities, which they were being overwhelmed with people returning from military action, men and women. Mm-hmm. And the numbers became overwhelming, and then the consistency of the symptoms became overwhelming. All right, you know. And so they finally started doing all this research on it, and somewhere in, like I say, either the early 80s or very late 70s, one of the very first books got published, and they gave it a name. They called it PTSD. Mm-hmm. All right. Yep. So until 1980, there wasn't even a word, let alone any kind of a diagnosis or any kind of connective information. You know, okay, I'm in New York City. I know that there's a place called San Francisco. Can you help me out any more than that? No. Right. Well, that's a heck of a long journey to try to sort your way through one step at a time. Mm-hmm. And so now what I find is I'm still struggling with absorbing the depth of the healing that horses are, that I now know. I feel like a preacher, all right, when I talk like this, but I now know that they are capable of doing, and do in fact do, although a lot of people don't realize that that's what's happening. They're just there riding the horse, okay, or they're just there loving the horse, all right, which is fine. It's just, you know, while that's happening, all of this physical and mental stuff, this energy, this exchange of energy is also happening to you. You just don't know it. Mm-hmm. Or you're not ready to realize that this is actually a part of what we call the animal horse. All right. So those parallels are there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned in your book, The Alchemy of Horses, you mention a couple books that helped you to start to see this differently.
Yes. Yeah. The first one was the one written by the medical doctor, and it is, let's see if I can hold it up here.
There we go.
It is The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah. I never could pronounce the guy's name. I think it's Dutch.
Oh, that's the Bessel van der Kolk. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then about, I don't know, 6 months or 8 months later, I got my hands on this one. All right. Mm-hmm. The Myth of Normal. And what's interesting to me is the rest of the title is The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture, which widens it out and
Yeah.
says, okay, these are the things that are happening. But when you go to make your way through it, you have to consider this larger parameter, because if you don't consider the larger parameter, you're going to get stuck. Right? Now, I think that's one of the, I know, at least for me, actually, and I want to widen that statement. It's not just me. I've watched students over the years that I've taught exhibit the same changes. I just didn't know how to classify them. I didn't have the information that I now have from personal experience and written back up, all right, by the certified folks, that in fact was the result of these chemical changes, these electrical changes in the body. And one step further than that is, and as far as I know, I haven't hit anybody except myself, maybe, that's written about this. They haven't connected them with the innate energy effects that come with horses. Okay. So it's still, somebody asked me and they said, well, how do you feel now that it's all done? It's all, you're healed and you're recovered. And I'm saying,
You just closed that book and that's it. It's over, right? Yeah.
On. Exactly. And if I had to put it in that way, I would say it was probably similar to being like an alcoholic. I don't think you can ever say that you're totally recovered. I think if I have absorbed the information that comes from the medical texts, the chemical changes in the body, all right, are permanent changes. So when you understand what's happening, then you can adjust and you can treat. All right. I don't mean treat Western medicine treat. I'm talking treat self-responsibility treat. Okay. Like you don't go into a bar and order a whiskey. Okay. But I personally, and it may just be that may be all it is. Maybe there's somebody who's progressed further than this can sit back and say, well, I got it all dealt with now. It's all, zipped up and closed and I can say it's the end. I can't say that.
Yeah.
I'm still asking questions.
If they figured that out and they're listening, hopefully they'll reach out.
Yes. It's absolutely. Share the information.
And so you talk a lot in the book about, in several of the chapters, about how each of the horses have helped you through that process and helped you with recognizing parts of that process.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. I sort of, the book starts out a bit roughly is what I call. It's impactful because I needed to share the traumas. And I tried to duck it. I tried to duck it on the first run through, and the editor said, nope. He said, you've got some good information here, but if you really want to, have the reader be able to absorb it, you're holding back. He said, you can't do that. Yeah, he said, you got to come clean. Yeah. So with a big breath and still some trepidation, I came clean in that first section. And then the rest of the book is the stories of each of the individual horses and what they took me through. Now, what I didn't do was make it a text manual of how they took me through it. I gave the general circumstances, but I didn't say, okay, go to the refrigerator, take out thus and so, mix it with thus and so, and then you drink that. Because each person's journey and answers have got to have the flavor of their own energy. And that energy, like I'm going to use the analogy of a dye, that energy, like putting a drop or two of a dye in water, is going to change at least slightly and maybe radically what the steps, the sequence of steps, and what the evidence might be. I mean, things are changing in my life. What am I looking at? All right. Or where does it come from? The other thing that I can't speak to because it's a mystery, which is why the horses gave me what they did. I just know that they did. All right. Because I was the recipient.
Right.
Now, I've always had the feeling that I could communicate with horses, although certainly in the first half to 3/4 of my career, it didn't have a literal meaning. It wasn't like I was talking in my head and the horse was hearing it in his head and he was answering me in English language in his head. It was a sense of what needed to be, or what I needed to do, or what the horse needed from me. So I guess you could say rather than coming out of the brain, it came out of the gut.
Sure.
But that was one of the interesting things to me, piece of information that came out of The Body Keeps the Score. I had presumed that all of this takes place in the brain, the thinking part of what we're conditioned to think of as our rational thinking, that type of thing, part of our being.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found out is that trauma, it affects the brain, but literally trauma can settle or live in different parts of our body. And if that has happened to you, that part is where you're going to feel pain. And until you acknowledge the trauma and sort it out, you can do all of the medical Western med things. You can cover it up with drugs, all right? Or distract yourself from it if it's not severe. But it won't heal because it's a living thing. It's in the cells and it's in your body in these places. Now, if there's people listening to this that are now thinking she's nuts and, I didn't smoke anything before I came on this, honestly, I understand. I do. And all I can do is encourage you to read the books I recommended. And I know you have another one that you said, in the realm of Hungry Ghosts.
In the realm of
Okay,
Hungry Ghosts.
that's another one. Yeah.
That's a great one. Yep.
Read and educate yourself. The other thing that I wanted to communicate was from my years of experience in teaching, and I'm going to use a percentage, and it's going to be low. At least 30% of the women who came to learn from me, well, there was a man or two included, but predominantly, I say women not because I'm isolating them, only because that was the statistics of my business. Okay.
Sure, it's the grand majority, absolutely.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And at least 30% of the women who came to me to supposedly learn about horses, improve their riding, help me train their horse, all those things, had a subtext that had to do with trauma. And maybe 3 or 4% of that 30% had any clue that was so for them. All right. That's the other thing.
Feel that the horses help with that? How do you, and maybe that's not an easy question to answer, but how do you feel like they helped you, or help others to?
Right.
I want to say let go, and I know that that's not the right way to say it, but
I'll
use that for lack of better at the moment.
It's okay because before you can let go, you're headed in the right direction. Okay, so we're on the right flow chart. But before you can let go, you got to understand. Now, I'm going to run into some conflicts with that because there are those out there and they have a principle behind it. And they say, no, you can let go without understanding. Here's my experience. You can block out something without understanding it. The word forgiveness appears a lot in those discussions, right? But you have to remember, or you'll eventually learn if you really work at this, all right? You'll eventually learn it's not the brain that you have to deal with, it's the body. And you can control the brain. I mean, if you work at it, all right? It's like learning to meditate or any of these other things. You can control the brain so you can forgive and let go by blocking out. Another one is forgive but don't forget. Okay, but that's the brain. The body doesn't function that way. At least from all evidence that I've seen, not only my personal, but a few other people that I know, it doesn't function that way. You've got to understand. It's like you have to kind of go in like a scientist and sort of rearrange the cellular structure. Now, here's the answer to your question. I think the energy, the proximity of the horse, the native electric energy that constitutes a horse, and they're just beginning to talk about it now. The scientists are just beginning to talk about it, about how the horse's heart is affects the human heart in close proximity, and on and on and on. Okay. All of that doesn't matter if you understand that if you accept even the most basic premise, then you have to open the doors going forward. You have to say, if this is possible, if they've already shown this scientifically, if they can prove this, then we are just at 0.00001 of what we don't know. All right. So my experience is that the horse's energy supports your own connection with your body. Not so much with your brain, although that's in there too, for sure. All right. But with your own body. And that speeded up. Again, it's tough because I don't have a wide, it's like a wide base of comparison. It'd be nice if I had 100 people that I'd interviewed or, something like this and can say that. But I've got empirical evidence, definitely, first off with myself, but then with a few others. There's no other explanation for it. The reason there's no other explanation for it is the consistency is the presence of the horse. Okay? Not intelligence level, not desire, not time invested, okay? Not even intent. The difference in the timing, the difference in the ability to leap forward or grasp the understanding that actually gives you the ability to go in and work with your own body, all right, is supported by this, I'm going to call it electrical. I'm not a scientist, so maybe that's not a good term, but whatever term that they figure it out, you could substitute it for that and it'll work. I know that. It's supported by the horse, their presence. Now, in that, I don't say that all horses are equal participants. I can't say that. It's not like they're standing at the barn door saying, take me, take me, take me.
Right.
There's a variety. Some horses are dedicated to it. Other times, probably based on their own experiencing, they're less cooperative or less wanting to motivate it, to offer that, because and this is an opinion, I will back up and say this is an opinion. It is my opinion that in order for the horse to allow us that access, they have to trust us. And what we know is, and I know you talk about this all the time, is that when you train a horse, you can get so much more better results. I don't want to use quick because I don't want to encourage quickness as your template, but and when there is no tension between trainer and horse, the horse is free to learn because he's free, or she is free, to say no without punishment.
Right.
So that same thing applies. The one comes in the door and says, I'm here to help. My guess is that it's because of that. That is their relationship. So that's the position they take. And God help me, because the people that want to say that we anthropomorphize our animals are going to want to rain on my head on that one. But I'm too old to care.
I've got a friend who would say, well, what do you have against hugging trees anyway?
I'll give you an example on one, probably as close as I can get. There's any number in here, but one of the stories is one of the chapters is about Sally's two horses, which is where I started. They were the masters, the equine educational masters in the beginning. And that was Sammy and Gotch. Sammy was an Anglo-Arab, not that it matters that much, except his level of sensitivity is reflected in, what you might think because of the Arab cross. I had never ridden in a Western saddle. I had never had any experience with any kind of Western discipline. The barn as a whole, went to a schooling show. It was a big deal. The local hunt put it on, and it was a big deal in the barn. And, if you were good, you got to go. And so we were at this thing, and the management of the show came to Sally and said, we don't have enough entries in our junior reining class. We're going to have to cancel it. Is there any way you can help us out? Because they knew she had, a background in the Western. She didn't ride Western, by the way. She just had a background in Western. Well, she did, but not normally, is what I mean to say. Not professionally. And Sally, bless her heart, when it came to anything to do with education and helping anybody out, it had to be really bad for her to say no. So apparently she said yes, that she could help him. And the next thing I know, she's pulled me aside and said, would you be interested in riding in a reining class? Well, actually what she said was, did I want to ride Sammy in a reining class? Now you have to understand that to ride one of Sally's horses was almost unheard of. It was the dream of every kid that ever was in that program. Again, every barn mouse that was ever in the program was to ride one of Sally's horses. And Gotch was the one who was the quarter horse, much more stable. So if anybody was going to ride a horse of Sally's, it was going to be Gotch, not Sammy, right? Sammy had been taught to be a reiner. I had an ego. I had a kid's ego, and I was also born a little dumb. So, Sally said, if Sally said that I could ride in the class, then I figured I could ride in the class. Now, mind, I'd never seen the class. I didn't know what I was supposed to do in it, but I had ridden hunter classes, and you have to learn the course, and you have to be able to ride correctly around a course. So I'd done all of that. So I knew I could, and I think I was thinking of it a little bit like a trail class, because I'd actually never seen a reining class. All right. So I said, fine. And she said, okay, we'll go watch, because the adult was before the junior. So we'll go watch a couple of goes, and I will talk you through it. And then she said, and you really don't have to do anything if you just stay in the middle. Sammy will do, and do a little steering here and there. Sammy will do everything that is required to do. And it was a fairly simple pattern. This was back in the day when shows were divided. Half the morning was English. Half the day was English, and the other half was Western. That's how far back this goes. So, we went in, we picked up the pattern was to go in, pick up a left lead lope, go down to lope down to the other end, make the turn, come down center line, put on the gas down center line, and do a sliding stop before you got to the entry gate. Do a half a spin, I think it was. I don't think it was 1.5, but it might have been. I don't remember. Then same thing, hit the gas pedal, going back, do a sliding stop, do a half turn, come back to the middle, pick up your figure of eights and do your 3 figure of eights, then your halt and your backup. It was really simple. When I was at the gate, she said to me, well, actually getting from where we were coming from after she put some Western clothes over my English clothes, we were headed down to the entry gate. And when I was at the gate, on the way down, and when I was at the gate, and just before I rode Sammy in, she said the same thing to me in the exact same words. She said, be sure and stay in the middle. Not complicated, not extensive, just be sure and stay in the middle. I went in, I rode, made the turn down, canter down alongside, made the turn, hit center line. Okay, Sammy had no problem opening Sammy up. Okay, zip. 3 strides and I'm no longer in center line. The other thing that she had told me was, and this I knew from lessons, okay, which is you don't straighten horse with the reins. You straighten the horse with your seat and your weight. Mm-hmm. Now I knew that. That was not a strange thing to me. But my brain was not functioning. I was in a gallop down the center line trying to do something that I had no business doing and my ego had sucked me into. And
so partially present at that moment.
Those of us who have know. Okay. So what did I do? I picked up my reins. I didn't pick them up. I had them, but I put my neck rein, and Jesus, he shot from 3 strides to the left, or whatever it was, left or right, all the way over to 4 or 5 strides to the opposite side of center line. So then I tried to correct him back with the rein again, and then we zigzagged back over here. Well, by the time we got down to the end, it looked like somebody who tried to walk home very drunk from a bad party.
Yeah.
The one going back was slightly better. Okay. We didn't overshoot the center line by 15 strides. We only overshot it by 3 or 4.
There you go.
Despite all that, there was only 6 entries in the class, and Sammy managed to garner, I think, a 3rd or 4th. I don't know. Came out of the ring, dismounted, headed back to the trailer stall. He's there waiting for me. I'm expecting a big pat on back because I think we came out with 3rd place in 6. And she's very, very quiet, which is always, that's always the warning flag.
Yep.
And she said, well, how did she put it? She said, so what happened, or something like that. And I got mad and said, well, I couldn't keep him on. He wouldn't stay on the center line. Mm. Oh my God. Wrong thing to say. I blamed the horse. The horse wouldn't listen. The horse wouldn't stay on center line, right? For the next month and a half, I had lessons on Sammy with Sally, which was not normal. Normally, my instructor was the junior instructor, the younger instructor there. Without stirrups, without reins. And I had to learn where center was. I had no more idea than the man in the moon where my physical pelvis was relative to the center of the horse.
Yeah.
I just thought I knew.
Right.
So Sammy taught me how not to be stuck. Now, Sally kind of helped it along. But Sammy, in being willing to put up with my errors, gross errors from his perspective, and not take advantage of me, opened himself up to allow me to learn that it wasn't Sammy who needed correction, it was me that needed correction. And God help me if this trip has anything in trip, meaning life, okay, has anything in common from day one to today, it's knowing that I have to go to the me first, whether it's horses or stuff happening I don't like or whatever. And Sammy was the very first one to really bring that home for me.
Yeah.
And all he had to do was just be the sensitive horse that he was, and, drop my butt in that arena, which he could have easily done. I mean,
Right.
any number of things, just not done half of what he obviously did, because he got a third place ribbon out of 6,
Right.
So that's an example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big difference sitting in the middle there and feeling how easy it can be when you stay in that middle versus when you teeter just a little and now you're riding a pinball down the length of the arena, right? Yeah.
Until you've gotten to that level where you've ridden a horse who is sensitive to your seat bones in that degree, I don't think you can truly appreciate how minuscule amount of weight that it takes to take a horse that's educated to that level. And the thing about it is I'm saying educated, but in truth, they feel it. It's just if they haven't been educated to the correct understanding of it, then what they do is they tighten their back or tense their back, and we begin to lose all of that biomechanical beauty, but also soundness that we're after. So it all feeds
or the
into
opposite,
that.
right? They've experienced that so much and it's meant nothing that they
Exactly.
tune it out, right? They know that the
Exactly.
rider had no,
Exactly.
they know in air quotes, right, that the rider didn't mean anything, even if the
Right.
rider maybe did. But yeah.
And God bless the school horses that do that willingly.
Right.
Because otherwise we'd have a bunch of people laying on the ground and nobody that wouldn't know how to ride.
Right. Exactly. So speaking of the sensitivity, you mentioned another learning opportunity in the book that happened at the Potomac Horse Center. Right. Speaking of sensitivity and speaking of using the legs and the, being in the center.
Well, it was another situation, just like going to Germany. Okay. I think I was in 5 to 6 years of running my own business. I'd been in California, and I became aware, maybe a little longer. I made a switch from hunter jumpers to eventing. Curiosity, new territory. I wanted something new to challenge me. And also, I liked the fact that it sort of felt a little bit about that cavalry, over, under, or through kind of feeling, which appealed to me. And I realized when I tried to go back to my dressage roots, that how badly I had slipped, how badly the habits that I had gotten into, because I was riding without eyes on the ground, I was riding without instruction, and I was riding these green horses. So a lot of times I had to compensate for what they were doing, not so much out of survival, but because I needed them here or there, and I used my body to teach them how to get here or there. In the meantime, I'm doing this one horse after another horse after another horse until I don't have the interior sense of where north is. Okay. Not being young, being green, not knowing that could happen, or that it could happen to that degree. I was under the illusion for a while that once I'd spent 4 years studying dressage in Germany, I was going to keep those skills till I died.
Right.
Now, if there's some of you aren't laughing, you should be. Okay.
Right. Well, it's like any other skill, right? You step away from it long enough, it's, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, you may always remember how to ride the bike, but you're not going to get on it and not fall down or anyway.
I have an experience with that. Yeah, I climbed on a bicycle after not having ridden one for about 20 years, and it was there's no other words. It was embarrassing. Like, yeah, I got the concept. I can stay upright, but man, I was riding in the dark quite a bit before I let anybody see me do it.
Well, I actually got motivated to correct it, to do something about it, because I was still showing and selling open jumpers. They brought in bucks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. At the time, the open jumper market brought more money in than the hunter market did. All right. So, I mean, it's not that I didn't handle hunters. I did, but I was always on the lookout for a good open jumping horse, especially in California. And I found one and had invested in him, and he was doing awesome. And I started to lose my nerve. And he kept covering for me in show after show. And on the way home from one particular show, he didn't refuse it. He should have refused it. It was a square oxer. That was my big thing. And he didn't refuse it, and he should have. I put him in literally underneath the front pole, and the horse bucked, just jumped off the ground like you see in the rodeo pictures, and broke his back in the sense of doubled in two to get himself across the width of the oxer, and then came down on the other side. He bucked over the jump, right? And it was like sort of a trumpet in my ear. This is wrong. I was doing the horse a tremendous disservice, and he made me feel so ashamed of myself because he was willing to go in an impossible position that I put him in because I was afraid, and started to overcheck him is what it's called, into the base of the fence. Okay. Yeah. So I was determined that I was going to fix it. I didn't want to be a coward. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I couldn't live with myself and continue to ask the horses I was sitting on to take up that kind of slack. Not when I knew that where are we again? Back to me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I figured the fastest way to do it was to sign up for a month's worth of education at Potomac Horse Center. And that's what I did. I closed my business. I went to Potomac. I signed up for 3 lessons a day, 1 jumping lesson, 1 dressage lesson, and 1 lunge lesson. Well, after about 3 or 4 days when I was there, Nuno Oliveira shows up. Now, for those of you who don't know who Nuno Oliveira is, he's one of the dressage masters in the past century. All right, mm-hmm. Truly, he is. He was very controversial at the time on the West Coast, but he is a master. And there was no advertisement. There was no anything. I certainly didn't know he was going to be giving a clinic for a week at St. Agatha's, which is the indoor arena at Potomac Horse Center at the time. And when I heard that he was going to be there, I thought, oh, I can't pass this up. I have got to go see this guy again, because he was, in California. People knew him in California, but either they fell down and wanted to kiss his feet, or they went ranting about, him. So it was way on either side. And anytime that gets to be the case, it's like, okay, I got to figure out what this is myself. This is ridiculous. We've got the space of a Grand Canyon between these two opinions.
Yeah, where's the middle?
And yeah, exactly. There's got to be a middle here. So I skipped one of my lessons, and I went in and I watched him ride, and I watched him teach. I then skipped 2 days worth of lessons before I got called into the organizer's office, the director's office. And she said, "What's going on?" I said, "I recognize the incredible learning opportunity I have here by doing nothing but auditing." Now, he worked horses from 7 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he gave a couple of instructions from 4 and then 5. I don't care what you say. I'm plastering myself in a seat for all 7 days. I don't want my money back. Keep my money, keep my fees. Mm-hmm. But I need to do this. I'm going to get more out of this than not that I said that to her, but I'm going to get more out of this than I'm going to get out of just instruction. Mm-hmm. So in one of those afternoons, there were some incredible things that happened. And I didn't put them all in I didn't put that many of them in the book, but I did talk about him. Mm-hmm. In the afternoon, he was giving a lesson, and he pulled up the horse, and I forget who or why he was talking, but he said very clearly to the class in that voice of someone who knows themselves, and there's no possibility of any quibble about what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
He was like that. He was kind of a big bear of a man. I would rather fall off the horse than ever use my legs to grip it.
And that was that.
That was that.
Yeah.
No more discussion, no more explanation. Not that it needed to be if you watched him ride, but.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all the stuff after that began to make more sense because I had watched this man do his skill. I told somebody one of the things that why he was so controversial in California was because he was asking young horses for steps of piaffe and passage as young horses.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the group that said too young, too fast, until I sat through that week. And then what I saw was he was so mentally connected to the horse. He and the horse's mental minds were on the same wavelength. And I watched this happen over and over and over again. So I know I'm not mistaken on it. The minute Nuno conceptualized of what it was he wanted the horse to do, whether it was a gait or the legs that he wanted moved or whatever it was, I could see him do it in his brain, and I could see the horse receive it in his brain. And we're talking 60 seconds, maybe not even. There was nothing in between the two of them.
Yeah.
There was no barrier. There was no flotsam and jetsam to slow anything down. If it was in Nuno's head, it was in the horse's head, clear as a bell. And because of how he rode his horses and how he handled his horses, I never saw him. Well, actually, I did see one say no, but most of them I never saw say no.
Mm.
And they offered him what he was picturing.
Yeah.
And there was the 2 steps of piaffe, or there was the 4 steps of passage. What I also never saw him do was ask for one single more step than the horse offered. It could be 1, it could be 2, it might have been 3, but seldom more than 3.
Yeah.
And that backed me off the thing about age. Not that he rode 2-year-olds, he didn't. But I mean, these were young horses that, were demonstrating upper level work.
Right.
So that was my accidental experience with Nuno Oliveira.
Yeah.
And like everything else.
There is certainly still the idea of there's a certain age that is, air quotes, too young to ask a horse to do something of that nature, right? And I think that it goes into exactly the way that you described it. Any age is an inappropriate age if you're asking them to do what they're incapable of, right? And if you're setting it up in a way where no is the more common answer, and that's
right.
But if you're setting that up and helping that to produce or to be produced and to blossom in the way that the horse is understanding and willing, and of course we're not talking about going out with the intention of piaffing 30 steps, passaging the long side.
No, exactly.
Asking, but the idea of the piaffe and the passage, those are collecting exercises, right? And if you can start that conversation with a horse early, and conversation might never look like a piaffe, right? But the idea of load the haunches, fold the hind legs, shift the weight. You can have those conversations on ride 1. Well, that's about the right time to start.
Yeah.
Right. Because then
and it helps
the horse to strengthen him so that he can carry the rider more easily. We're not talking about grinding him into the ground. We're talking about helping to educate the body so he can carry the rider more easily.
Right.
And that's our goal as an apology to sitting on him in the first place.
I agree. Or at least our obligation to sitting on them in the first place. Yeah. And it helps to remember that as babies, they can do these things.
Absolutely.
So it's a matter of just what you said. It's a matter of the horse conceptualizing it as though it was his idea all right, and offering that, partial or full or two-step, whatever it is, offering it of his own accord. Now, my only objection to talking about that in today's world is, I'm sorry, I don't think there's a dozen people in the world that are riding that have that kind of. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've seen 4 or 5 at the mental connective level that I saw, with Nuno.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a rare thing to be that connected, and yet that's what we're always after, right? And that's why
Mhm.
people will watch videos and look at photos and try to replicate or try to daydream about what that feels like.
Well, one of the things, and I told you this, one of the things that I just did a couple of, probably a week or so ago, was I started a new Facebook page, The Horse in the 21st Century. And you sort of have been doing that. I don't know that we are exactly on the same titling level, but when you started getting people off horses and you started instructing for the groundwork, I know when I saw it start to happen, and personally, I was cheering. And the more that I explore this capability, this energy exchange, and its significance between the horse and the human, that you don't have to be riding to do that. And yet we're all sort of conditioned, when we think of the horse, we think of riding. And
Right.
we need to make, I hope that there's a group of people who are starting to be interested in horses, that are letting go of that goal as the primary goal, sitting on their back as the primary goal. Not that I think that you never have to sit on the horse's back, but I think that's possible. But to get to a point where, if you want to access the horse's willing participation in healing, or helping you heal, or helping you find your way to healing, the door to that is on the ground.
Mm.
It's on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where you start the trust, or at least for 95% of the people that put their hands on horses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's where you start the trust. And it's the fastest way. If you had a hurting body, or if you had a body that was not awake, and you went into a really caring therapist, caring besides being expert, besides knowing their profession to a gnat's eyebrow, okay? And they spent an hour with you, just becoming really familiar, not with the general human body, but with your body, right? And their touch was a proof of the pudding. As they touched your body in wherever, all right, it was proof that they were learning your body, and your body told you that. You didn't have to guess about it. Your body told you that, okay? If you can take that scenario and you can lay it with the horse, all right, come in and spend that time, be that expert, and spend that time knowing your horse's body, not a horse's body,
Right.
but knowing your horse's body, or that horse that is standing in front of you or standing with you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then you have
more than
plugged.
the anatomy, more than the parts and pieces. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you have made that energetic plug. I promise it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you put whatever the name of the nipple is with the thing in ITT these days. The weird little things you have to, one's a she and one's a he, and you're supposed to match them up. Well, there's a name for it anyway.
Okay.
I just don't remember it.
You lost me there.
Somebody in the audience probably will know.
Right. Exactly. Well, I
Oh.
really like that way of thinking about it, and I think that's a really great analogy. It actually brings me to a virtual lesson that I was just teaching yesterday, in fact, where the student was working on helping her horse unlock, release tension, that sort of thing. And she admits that she's one that tends to be a little bit quicker in her mind, right? And doing, right?
Mhm.
As well, this horse is similar in that way, busy in the mind
Mhm.
and also in the body oftentimes. But in this particular moment that I'm thinking of, it was, can you just rest your hand on him, and not just, what do you feel, but what do you feel under what you feel,
Mhm.
right? And what's actually
Mhm.
taking place there. And it was interesting because it was, in a span of uh, maybe 5-10 minutes, started to get a really big change in that horse. And because she had to let down as
Mhm.
well. So that connection that you talk about energetically and that sort of thing, however we describe it, in this case at least, it was so visually obvious that I'm looking at it through the computer screen, teaching somebody, miles and miles away. But you could see that shift in both of their energies, right?
Mhm.
It was just like
Mhm.
like cooking in a crock pot. Like somebody took off that pressure valve and it just,
Mhm.
the pressure just dropped. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
and the talent and experience that you brought to bear to see that, even though it was in video, it is available. It doesn't have to be. So sorry, let me start that sentence again. The talent and experience you brought to see that, your students can acquire that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Absolutely.
They don't have to be born with a special talent.
Right.
What they have to do is train themselves to look. I don't mean with the eyes, although it doesn't preclude the eyes, all right?
Right.
But to look with their entire being. So, in a situation, taking that situation as an example, all right? I would have said to the student, so the first touch, the first feel, the first location is, what do your fingers feel? So now I'm feeling hair, and then I'm feeling skin. And if they're really talented, maybe they can say, I'm feeling the muscle. All
Mm-hmm.
right. But if they were really talented, they would feel the fascia before they felt the muscle. You see what I'm doing? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
When they've done that, I'm going to pull them back and say, let's do it again. And now I only want you to tell me we're going to go through the same exercise. Only when you put your hand on the horse, you're not going to tell me what your fingers feel. I want to know what your gut feels.
Mm-hmm. There you
And
go.
I want to know how you know that you're feeling it in your gut. You are literally training yourself to look for and establish the connection for that exchange of energy. And if you do it, the reward is you're going to have those answers with your own horse every time.
Mm-hmm.
You still
Mm-hmm.
have to practice the physical.
Okay.
I mean, you still have to learn how to manage your own body and ride and do all this other stuff. But that connection that you are looking for with that horse, which will help you in down the road as you learn the physical, all right,
Mm-hmm.
that's there for anybody that wants to put the time in on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so neat to see when people start to recognize that, when they start to feel it,
Mm,
you know, or see it. I tend to say feel it. It's like you're talking about feeling it in the gut or things like that. It's, yeah, when you feel that, you can't, you might not be able to replicate it immediately, but you can't unfeel it,
right.
right?
Yes,
Just like
I
when you
agree
learn what pattern
100%.
movement looks like, you can't unsee it,
100%.
right? Yeah.
And I say gut, but in truth, if I were in the moment and they said I feel it in my left heel, I wouldn't reject that.
Absolutely.
If your left heel is where your trauma is focused,
Mm-hmm.
left heel it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Cool. I love it. This has been so much fun. Donna, let's quickly I want to be respectful of your time. And so I've got some wrap-up questions for you that come at the
Okay.
end of these podcasts that kind of everybody
Okay.
has to ask these wrap-up or answer these wrap-up questions. But first, how are people going to find your book, The Alchemy of Horses?
All right. There's two ways. If I will, the deal I worked out with the publisher is if you order it through the publisher, which is on, it's RD Reed Publishers. Okay. It's on the
Okay.
back of the book. Not that they have the book, but it's reedpublishers.com. They have, I have signed copies for them. So you can get a signed copy if you order it from Reed. If I'm not mistaken, the cost is $1 or $2 cheaper than Amazon, and they will pay for shipping.
Fantastic.
Otherwise, otherwise it's a simple Amazon purchase.
That's fantastic. And there's also an audio version available, correct?
Yes, there is, but it does not have my blessing. They did an AI.
I was just gonna say that's the AI voice that mispronounces the horse terms in there. Yes, yes, I will admit I listened to it. It was I was listening as I was working and all of those
Oh my
things.
God. Oh my God.
I
I
can't
I did.
particularly remember what some of them were, but some of them I was like,
Oh, longing. Are you longing the horse
oh
in
right,
in place
yeah,
of
that was
lunging?
one
Are
for
you
sure.
longing the
Yeah.
horse? What's the other one? There was another one that was every time they hit it, it just set my teeth on edge. I did get an offer from, I think, what is a credible producer for a good audio. I just haven't had a chance to get around it. I do this by
Mm.
myself. So, and the learning curve is incredibly steep. Jesus.
Yeah.
So I haven't gotten back to those nice people. And I intend to, and then it'll be replaced. The one on Amazon will be replaced.
In due
So if you
time.
have to get the audio, if that's all you've got, then go with my blessing. But God, if you can read it, don't do the.
Yes, perfect. There were several times where I would chuckle and be like, "That's not that word."
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm enough of a perfectionist. I mean, there's my blood, sweat, and tears is in this, and so it's like, no, you don't
Yeah.
get to misunderstand it or not understand it because of that.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Oh, and I want to put up for folks also that new Facebook page that you mentioned, that Horses as Healers, the new role of
Right.
equines in the 21st century. Is that where
Yeah.
folks can find you more directly online then?
Well, I mean, Facebook, I just got it started. So if you put in the title, you'll get there. You might have to punch a subtitle again and say, yes, I really want to go to this Facebook page. They
Okay.
can always go to just my Facebook page, Donna Snyder-Smith, but I have a mixture of things on there. The one, Horses in the 21st Century, I am deliberately focusing on the healing situations where horses are healing people. And I do sprinkle in what I feel is valid cutting edge information on if I hear something about helping horses.
Okay.
So there'll be a couple of posts mixed in there about this and how to help the horse and get over whatever, or physically. So it's a
Mhm.
little bit mixed up right now, but yes, they ought to take a visit on that occasionally.
Perfect. Good. All right. It's wrap up question round or wrap up question time. What comes to mind as one of the hardest lessons you've had to learn in this pursuit of your passion?
That in the midst of feeling like you had the that you were a total failure and were standing with your nose against a brick wall because you couldn't figure out the reason for, I mean, in this case, early career with me, it was why can I not get the horse to do what I want it to do? Is it my training?
Mhm.
Is it physical in the horse? Am I missing something in the horse? All those kind of questions that come up.
Mhm.
And then towards the end, in the second half of the career, it's what have I missed about me? What am I not looking at? What am I refusing to see? What do I need to tend to at home in order to get past this barrier so I can start to roll again?
Yeah.
And depression comes with it sometimes. I mean, when the answer wasn't just there in the first few questions, in the first few minutes or the first few hours or even the first few days, it was sometimes you just kind of have to suck it up and go out and do the cleaning and do the tack and do whatever and keep your mind in neutral.
Mhm.
When I was able to do that, the answer I needed eventually presented itself. And every time.
There you go. Good. Good. Where do you see the future of horsemanship heading?
Oh dear, that's a loaded question.
I feel like that's not a great let's wrap it up with short answers kind of a question, right?
Well, as I said earlier, I see it as two distinct paths. I'm encouraged because I'm seeing much more interest and action on the path that I want to see, which is incorporating the horse in a broader scope or spectrum of our lives. Yes, it's a joy situation, a sharing, a joy, a riding, a walking with, doing all those things. But I can also go out and hang in the barn and let the horse's energy help me heal myself.
Mhm.
Right. The other end of it, I just, oh God, until we get a system in this country that makes for riding instructors, all right, an education or at least a valid testing system that is consistent from coast to coast and in the basics of educating instructors, I don't think we have a hope in where.
Mhm.
I mean, right now it's like when I gave clinics, when I was doing my center riding clinics all over the country, my biggest sadness was at the end of the clinic, the people who attended got so much out of the clinic. The first thing they asked me was, okay, well, what do I do now? Where do I go find somebody like you, somebody that teaches like you?
Mhm.
I had no answer. We are huge in the country, and half the time people who really want to learn are hours and miles and mountains away from the quote unquote the best instructor. And
Mhm.
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
Keep trying to set your life up so that you get to who you need would be the best
There we go.
response I could give.
Yeah. There we go. So that's going to go into the next question then. What would be one thing you'd recommend for riders to either work on or to think about to make their horsemanship better this week?
What your hips are doing. How much flexibility do you have in your hips? Because no matter how well you understand what your seat is supposed to be doing, your pelvis, which your seat bones, bottom of the two parts of two sides of your pelvis,
Mhm.
are going to be either permitted or restrained by the tightness in your hips.
There we
And as a
go.
matter of fact, there's a young man who's obviously very good at what he does, and I just posted on my page, not on the horse page, but on my Donna Snyder-Smith page, I posted his exercise for the hips, hip flexors.
Mhm.
However, I also had to put up a caution because he didn't. I know what he's doing. It's excellent. It's better than I've seen anybody. More complete is in the better. Okay, that's defining the better. More complete than I've seen anybody else give. But even if you're an advanced rider, please, please, please go into those exercises very carefully, very slowly. Pay attention to your body. If you're in a hurry or if you're checked out, you can hurt yourself, and it's going to take a heck of a lot longer for your tendons and ligaments and muscles to repair themselves than it would have been if you didn't even go do the exercise. So that's the caution. But it's on my website. It's on my Facebook page.
On the Facebook. Great. I love that. That's fantastic. And then final question for this. This has been a lot of fun. If you had a giant billboard you could print a message on for the entire world to see, what would it say? I'm borrowing this from another podcaster because I just think it's one of the most fantastic questions.
How about I put this up? I was thinking I might find a place to use this. So let me put this up.
There we go.
See if we can read it, if I can hold it so your audience can read it.
See if I can read that out loud here as you hold it there. A horse can hear a human heartbeat from at least 4 feet away. They hear intention. They feel vibe. They are the tellers of self and the mirrors of souls. I like it. That's pretty impactful.
Meditate on that. Meditate on that and take it to the times 100 level, and you might be close.
I love it. Donna, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you to your audience. I appreciate those who showed up to listen.
There we go. Thank you. And I'd like to recommend for everybody again to check out through rdspublishers.com Donna's latest book, The Alchemy of Horses. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.